Reading between the lines or just listening to manager Bob Melvin speak, it's pretty clear that this is going to be a season, even on the position player side, where the Giants are going to evaluate their own talent, and there is some upside.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, back to 5 in March, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show for almost 6 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day or 3 days a week for now. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started is by discussing what I mean when I said it's pretty clear just by either reading between the lines or just reading quotes from Bob Melvin that the Giants are probably pretty much done making moves. All of these free agents that there was a possibility that they could come to the Giants, like Alex Bregman or Pete Alonso, they're off the board. There's really no difference makers left in free agency, and it would have to come via trade. But then we hear about things like this, the DH role, and also we hear about guys like Marco Luciano, and we hear about the backup catcher spot. And it's pretty clear it's a season where there's going to be evaluation of some of their in-house talent. And it starts with the DH position, although this one's a little bit tricky. Bob Melvin was asked, basically, I watched actually the interview by Alex Pavlovich. He was straight up asked, he said, if you had to make a lineup today, who would be your DH? And that's a tough question, and it kind of stumped Bob Melvin. Not that he was completely unprepared. He just said, I don't think I actually have the exact quote about what he said, but basically he said he didn't know. He wasn't sure. He said that's the one spot where they aren't entirely clear on who it would be. Because if you look otherwise across the diamond, you got Patrick Bailey at catcher, you've got Lamont Wade Jr. at first, presuming it's a right-handed pitcher on the mound. You've got Tyler Fitzgerald at second, Adames at short, Chapman at third, Elliot Ramos in left, Jung-Hoo Lee in center, and Mike Yastrzemski in right. That's, like it or not, it's pretty easy to put that together. But then you ask who's the DH, and it's a little bit harder. And as we have speculated on this show, Bob Melvin said that Wilmer Flores and Jerar Encarnacion, oh man, I kind of said that last one, Jerar Encarnacion, however you want to say it, do stand out a little bit more. That's what he said. They stand out a little bit more. So Pavlovich wrote, on the first day of camp, manager Bob Melvin said the DH slot is the biggest puzzle that needs to be figured out this spring on the position player side, although there are two clear frontrunners. Wilmer Flores is back for his 6th season in San Francisco, and Jerar Encarnacion will look to break through in his 2nd. There are plenty of others, most notably young players like Luis Matos and Marco Luciano, players we will talk about a little bit later on today, who are blocked in the outfield. I would argue that they're not necessarily blocked when you're looking at a guy like a 35-year-old Mike Yastrzemski. You make room if one of those players starts to earn it. That's the beauty of a little bit of flexibility there. And also, Jung-Hoo Lee and Elliot Ramos are relatively unproven themselves. So blocked is not a word I would use there, but I get what he means. And then Pavlovich continues by saying, but Melvin's preference at the moment is to go with experience, which is a little strange because Jerar Encarnacion doesn't have a lot of experience at all himself. I mean, I think Luis Matos has far more experience at the major league level even than Encarnacion, even though Encarnacion is older. Encarnacion is 27. And gosh, I'm writing Luis Matos on Fangraphs, and it took forever for the name to populate. Anyway, Matos has 409 major league plate appearances compared to 200 for Encarnacion. So that's a little bit of another mischaracterization. I wouldn't say that Encarnacion, I mean, he has more professional experience, Encarnacion, but Encarnacion is interesting. I keep mentioning this. And also, a major factor is that Encarnacion is out of minor league options, whereas Luis Matos and Marco Luciano, they are not. And so, also, continuing just on this DH theme, Pavlovich writes, new president of baseball operations Buster Posey said Wednesday that his team is set at first base with LeMahieu Jr. and Flores. And Melvin wants Flores' experience on the bench on days when he's not at first or DH. For Encarnacion, this spring represents the best opportunity of his professional career, and the Giants are hopeful he jumps on it. Melvin said, quote, he can not only swing the bat for power in our ballpark, but can DH and play some first and play some outfield. We're gonna take a hard look at him. He impressed us last year. And Pavlovich, I think in this piece, also mentioned the batted ball data, which I have been kind of, I don't want to say screaming about, but pointing to over and over in the last few weeks when just taking a hard look at Encarnacion, because it does really, truly jump off the page. The actual results don't jump off the page, but if you look at kind of the under the hood numbers, they do. And it was a limited sample, but this guy played in Mexico and hit, it's not listed on Fangraphs. Is it? No, I don't think it is. But he hit like 19 homers in 24 games or something in the Mexican league. And then the Giants were like, hey, we'll sign this guy. And Pavlovich noted that Farhan Zaidi said at the time, even in like someone playing backyard baseball, they would take a look at that because it's such a bonkers result. And then he went on to hit 10 homers in 33 games in AAA, and they called him up. And the results weren't great, but the expected numbers were really good. And so there's just reason for intrigue. And if you don't have him on your major league roster to start the season, unless he's on the injured list, then they have to expose him to waivers. And for a team in the Giants position where they need players who are basically earning little money to break through and produce, and therefore the money that they do spend, they have surplus in other areas, that's how you build a winning team. And so his max exit velocity last year, 95th percentile. His arm strength didn't measure. Let's see. None of this kind of qualified because he didn't play enough, but his max exit velocity was 95th percentile. His barrel percentage was 15%, which is very high. His hard hit rate was among the highest in the game. His launch angle sweet spot, I'm really glad they changed the name of that from sweet spot percentage to launch angle sweet spot. Basically hitting the ball in an ideal band of launch angles that lead to good results when you hit it in that kind of range was exceptional, and his bat speed was exceptional. So there is a lot to like here. There's just an unproven quality, but that was what I said, is that they're going to give opportunities to guys like this, I think. I can't see him not making the team unless he's just dreadful in spring. And so another guy who is unproven and is going to get chances is Marco Luciano, and we'll get into him and his latest situation in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, hello Steph Curry, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, as promised, we are going to get into the latest with Marco Luciano, who is just a major name for the Giants in general. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Like I said, we're 3 days a week through February. February is a short month. We're halfway through, and so we're going to be back to Monday through Friday coming up real quick here, as on Monday, position players report, and then on Friday, a week from today, is the first spring training game. And so things are happening. It's an exciting time. And yeah, thanks for making us your first listen. And we're daily, Monday through Friday, 10 months out of the year. And so getting to Marco Luciano and his situation, I mean, just to put a bow on that, Wilmer Flores is here, and he's a solid, like if Encarnacion flops, like you do have a solid veteran player in Flores. No, he's not Pete Alonso going to hit 40 home runs. No, but at the same time, he was really good offensively in 2023 and injured in 2024, and said that he pushed himself too hard playing through an injury. But, you know, that happens every year. It's like everybody feels like they're going to make better decisions and whatnot. And of course, someone else will do something dumb in 2025 and not perform well, even though we expected them to or whatever. So turning the page, though, to Luciano, this is coming from an article in the Mercury News by Justice de los Santos titled SF Giants Marco Luciano, or just Luciano, hoping to, quote, find himself after disappointing 2024 season. Well, actually, first, I'm going to quote Alex Pavlovich, who tweeted that Bob Melvin said Marco Luciano will only play the corner outfield spots this spring. Only play the corner outfield spots this spring. That is a big deal. I'm ending the quote there because he has never played the corner outfield spots in professional baseball. I don't know if maybe towards the end of last year he started to move to the outfield, but this has been a guy they've insisted could stick at shortstop, and now they're saying he can't even play second. Like they don't want him anywhere near the dirt anymore. And I kind of I think I gave a hard time to Keith Law for his assessment last year, and Keith Law was not happy about it. He watched some of the episode, and I do owe him probably an apology for that, and he did know better, but I digress. That's not important to a lot of you listening right now. I'll just get into continuing on with this news. But yeah, so he'll only play not just outfield, but corner outfield. So that limits him to 2 spots, and also spots that Pavlovich himself noted were, quote, blocked by, I don't know, Ramos and Yastrzemski. I wouldn't call that blocked again. And there's also the DH spot. So he can play corner outfield, but he could also DH. So the Giants have some flexibility, and they're going to give opportunities to young and unproven players. And I like that because that is really what they need to do at this point, given where they are. And according to Pavlovich, via Bob Melvin, I think, or no, just according to Pavlovich, Luciano admitted this morning, I don't know if this was today or yesterday, he was, quote, totally lost at the plate last season, but he took a break to clear his head in the offseason and then worked on adjustments with his swing. So De Los Santos quotes Luciano, who said, quote, my mental process for this is I need to do what I need to do, Luciano said through team interpreter Edwin Higueros. And then about the Giants moving his position to the outfield, Luciano said, quote, they have the last word. They will choose the best player. So it's not just about him moving positions. It's about his role with the team. They will choose the best player that they feel is going to help the team. The only thing I can control is my performance and practice and continue developing myself here. And then De Los Santos said, Luciano, who showed off his outfielder's glove to reporters, admitted that he felt, quote, a little bit uncomfortable, end quote, playing the outfield at the beginning of the offseason, but became more comfortable as he took more reps. After working in the outfield with a trainer in the Dominican Republic this winter, Luciano said he plans to learn from his fellow outfielders in camp by making observations and asking questions. And then Luciano said to De Los Santos, quote, mentally, I just have to accept it and move on and do what's best for the team. They told me that changing positions was going to help the team, so that's what I'm doing. And then De Los Santos says, Luciano believes that his inability to hit for power last year was a product of him not being himself. Luciano said, quote, I was doing things that I was not normally used to doing. It took me a while to identify what I was doing, so I worked on that. I think this year is going to be different because now I understand what I was doing wrong. And then Bob Melvin said he tracks the ball, meaning, you know, he's showed some good plate discipline at the major league level and in the upper minors, if memory serves. But I've seen him, surprisingly, he was kind of a free swinger, but I've seen him develop pretty good plate discipline. So he does track the ball. And then Melvin said, he hits the ball hard the opposite way. There's probably some more pull in his game when he plays every day, but he never really had the opportunity with us, Melvin said. I don't know that we'd tweak his swing or anything like that. Obviously, we'd like to see a little bit more power, but when you're not playing very often, it's tough to do that in the big leagues. And Melvin is spot on. And look no further than like Elliot Ramos. He didn't really break out until he got an opportunity, he performed, and then he continued to get opportunities, and then it played out into a season in which he made the All-Star team and hit over 20 home runs. So for Luciano, he, according to scouts and scouting reports, by the way, he's 23 years old pretty much all season. He'll turn 24 in September. So this is a young player, not a player to give up on, a player who's played 41 major league games, has 0 major league home runs. So when Melvin says, obviously, we would like to see it a little bit more power, yeah, that is obvious given no home runs yet at the major league level. Joey Bart went quite a while with no home runs too. And so, hot take, it's not a hot take at all, Luciano will hit a major league home run this year. Hopefully he hits 35, but he'll hit at least one this year. That's my totally lukewarm take. But De Los Santos continued to say Luciano didn't believe he was mentally ready to play winter ball. And then I put in like an aside here. De Los Santos was meaning to compare Luciano to Luis Matos, who won Rookie of the Year in the Venezuelan Professional Baseball League, hitting 300 with 10 home runs and 41 RBIs over 55 games. So Luis Matos went and played winter ball and was awesome, whereas Luciano didn't play at all. But he said he wasn't mentally ready to play winter ball. He said, quote, I just wanted to tune out a little bit. work on my physique, work on getting in shape, and mainly spend time with the family and concentrate on what I needed to do for this year. So some people might take that poorly. I don't. Baseball is really tough on players mentally sometimes. And in fact, the next player we're going to talk about, Tom Murphy, essentially, and he's a major league veteran who's had success at the major league level, talked about how difficult last year was on him mentally. And so for Luciano to struggle the way he has and to just get jerked around from AAA to the major leagues and not really get opportunities, and the defensive struggles, like I don't know if you remember, but he went through a stretch where he was playing shortstop and he was making critical errors like in the 9th inning of multiple games in the span of a week. Like it was crazy what was happening. And so sometimes you just need to step away. Sometimes I've had to step away from this show for mental reasons. Like, not that the show itself was the problem, but like I've had things that have come up that have forced me to step away. And so let's not act like these guys are not human. So this game is really hard. You get put in the spotlight. You have expectations put on you. You're 23 years old now. He was 22 last year. And that's a lot to deal with. And you're living in a country that you weren't born in. Your family is not here. It's a lot. And so don't lose sight of that. And also don't give up on Luciano. But the fact that he's just a corner outfielder now is certainly relevant for like their depth chart and just for planning for the future. I think that Yastrzemski, being the age that he is, which is 35, and I don't consider that position blocked, is what I'm basically saying. Like if Marco Luciano or Luis Matos or a number of other players like performs really well, you have the ability to kind of just put Mike Yastrzemski on the bench. It's the last year of Yastrzemski's contract. I've been saying he's 35. He's actually 34 and will turn 35 in August, Mike Yastrzemski. But he's not a player who should be like absolutely guaranteed a starting role no matter what. And then you could say something similar about Elliot Ramos in that he hasn't, it's different. It's a very different circumstance. But one season of success does not guarantee season 2 of success. Although I will point out, some people are going to say sophomore slump about Elliot Ramos. There's been research into this, and it's not actually a thing. It does happen sometimes, but it also doesn't happen sometimes. And so it's kind of like lots of players have good seasons and then not so great seasons. And so the sophomore slump is not like a statistically significant thing, just by the way. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, the backup catcher spot. It's another position where there's some debate about who that player should be, and we will get into it and why I think Tom Murphy, despite being like someone targeted by Giants fans, like vilified almost by Giants fans for his poor performance in like 13 games, literally, why I think he should be the favorite for that spot. So we'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, all right, as promised, we are going to get into the backup catcher spot and why I think it should be Tom Murphy, who is the favorite despite his poor performance in, oh my goodness, 13 games. It is insane to me to judge a player based on 13 games. Like any player, any 13 game stretch, good, bad, in between, 13 games this guy played. It wasn't pretty. He was quite bad. He had 118, 211 on base, 235 slugging, 37% strikeout rate, and bad defense. Like it was just bad. Minus half a win above replacement in 13 games. I mean, it's impressively bad. However, this is a guy who was brought in to do one thing, and I believe that he will do it if he's healthy. And that's been the issue for him, is that he's not been able to stay healthy. That was the issue last year. So before I get into the numbers, I'll just read some quotes from Susan Slusser of the Chronicle, who wrote about Tom Murphy and the backup catcher role and competition. The article is called After Tom Murphy's Rough First Giants Season, Can He Regain Favor as the Backup Catcher? And this was published on the 13th of February. And Slusser says, Murphy is the front runner among the backup catcher hopefuls, but there are no guarantees. Something a man who went through such a rough inaugural season with the Giants knows all too well. He's a good offensive catcher. He hit 273 with 18 homers for the Mariners in 2018. Okay, that's 7 years ago. But he has been limited to 74 games over the past 3 seasons because of injuries. In a small not an average of 74 games a year, but a total 74 games in the last 3 seasons. So that's the issue for me. But she says, in a small sample, since he caught just 12 games, he had a 7.12 catcher's ERA. To me, totally irrelevant because of what she said. 12 games. The pitchers have more to do with the ERA than the catcher. Catchers probably play a role, but not all. They don't shoulder the blame. Mostly, it's the pitchers. So she says San Francisco might well prioritize a defense first type catcher to play behind Patrick Bailey. Max Stassi, signed as a minor league free agent, has even more big league experience and earned a solid reputation behind the plate. Murphy is up for the challenge, and his intensity and his work habits certainly fit one category Posey has prioritized: grit. And then a quote from Murphy. He said, that's extremely important. In my opinion, when you look at the other teams that we're going to be facing and hopefully fighting for a playoff position, we need to be grittier than them. So I really like that word. I like that word to describe a team, and I like that word to describe myself personally as well. So Murphy's coming in with a chip on his shoulder. I just think it's wild to be so harsh on a player after 13 games. Like, it just, you can't, like, Willie Mays went 0 for 19 or more to start his major league career. And we're talking about Willie Mays. Any great player goes through rough 13 game stretches. I'm not calling Murphy a great player. He's good at what he does, which is hit left-handed pitching. And when you're a backup catcher, you really just have to kind of have a strength that a team can leverage, and that he has. And historically, Patrick Bailey has hit lefties worse than he's hit righties. He's also worn down, so maybe some less, playing less might benefit Patrick Bailey, or you could make the case that he needs to play more to continue to build up his strength. I don't know. But Murphy is supposedly fully healthy, as generally players are at this time of year, or claim to be best shape of their lives, blah, blah, blah. But in Murphy's major league career, there is kind of an alarming 30.7% strikeout rate to go along with this. But he's hit 258 against left-handed pitching with a 347 on-base percentage and a 475 slugging, which is a 218 isolated power, slugging minus batting average, 341 batting average on balls in play. That strikeout rate is a little concerning. The walk rate is also high at 11.2%, but it's a 122 weighted runs created plus, which means 22% above average offense. Not like adjusting for that he has the platoon advantage, but just overall, any given at bat, if you just take a random sample of Murphy facing a lefty, you would find, well, certainly if you watched all 489 plate appearances, that he was producing at a more than 20% above average rate. And against right-handed pitching, let's see, I don't even know what this is going to show. He's been about 12% below average, still hitting for power, but the batting average and on-base percentage are not nearly as good. And then defensively, it wasn't pretty last year, I'm not going to lie. But again, it was a small sample. Let me look at some of the numbers. I mean, it hasn't been great, especially the last couple seasons. He he's been okay. He's not like atrocious from what I can see just by glancing at his career numbers. Catcher defense is kind of hard to quantify without going over to Baseball Savant, where I'm trying to jump over really quick. I know it wasn't pretty last year, but just overall run value, let's just go 2019 +6, 2021 -5, 2022 0, 2023 -6, 2024 -3. So that's -9 runs, and I believe that's considered runs above average in his major league career, which spans 2,000 innings. So -9 runs in over 2,000 innings. It's just not that bad. So anyway, the reason is that I say he should be the favorite. First of all, they're paying him a guaranteed salary. I know it's a sunk cost, but they signed him to hit left-handed pitching. He's signed for $4 million this year. Don't lose sleep over that. It's not a very high salary. There is a little bit of a buyout, I think, on him. Yeah, $250,000. So he's owed $4.25 million for 1 year, essentially. There is a club option for 2025 or 2026. He could have a huge season and they could pick it up. Like, I believe that that's possible if they play him in that role. So there are other options. Max Stassi. I don't know. I just think that I agree with Slusser that Murphy should be the favorite. Stassi's been incredible, though, defensively, actually. When I look at the numbers, he's never hit well at all, but he has been very good defensively from what I can tell. And I heard Bob Melvin saying Stassi was one of the OG original, like, really good pitch framers when this became a quantifiable thing. And so they've got this guy in camp, I think, as a non-roster invitee. Yeah, he signed a minor league contract in November. They've also got, who is this player? From the Texas Rangers. They claimed off waivers Sam Huff, who's out of minor league options. So they have to carry him on the roster or else expose him to waivers. But I would think Huff is also a guy with some maybe more offensive upside. I'm not quite so sure about the defense. But anyway, it's a position, it's a role to watch. But I just think we're being way too judgmental of 12 or 13 games of performance by Tom Murphy last year. That's just my opinion. But you could definitely convince me after I just took a brief glance at Max Stassi's career performance. The offense is not great, but the defense looks kind of off the charts. And so anyway, but that's what Bailey does. So you could argue, like, if you want to get some offense, plus if you got your backup catcher being able to hit lefties really well and he's sitting on the bench, you can use him as a pinch hitter. Yeah, some teams don't like to use their backup catcher in case their primary catcher gets injured in a game, but the risk of that is very low. And I don't know. I think Murphy should be the favorite, and hopefully they can. I mean, it was a minor league contract for Stassi, so hopefully they can stash Stassi in like AAA and have him be that third string catcher who they'll probably inevitably need, especially with Murphy's injury history. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick. Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. Thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again next week. Have a great weekend. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.